further devolution came into force in the West Midlands and Greater Manchester earlier this year, with 5 more devolution deals to come into effect before the end of 2024.
And that, of course, means more money coming out of centralised Westminster and out to various authorities, or whether that be national assemblies as well. But with more and more scandals and mismanagement engulfing devolved authorities from Birmingham to Holyrood, many are asking if devolution has been a disaster.
Local government editor at Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs, is one of those people who thinks devolution boosts bureaucracy over democracy. But GB News' senior political commentator disagrees and thinks that devolution brings decision-making closer to the people. Good morning to you both. But Nigel Nelson, I suppose it brings decision-making closer to the people, but it depends if those people are any good. I've often, in my career, I've looked and I've thought the quality of people that are drawn into public representation, particularly at council level, often is not very good.
No, which is why more people should actually stand for election. And the problem is that a lot of councils have elderly councillors there because they're the people who can afford the time. But as with any political institution, it relies very much on the quality of the people. And that's why people should stand for election. I mean, devolution, as far as I can see, has worked in the sense it's brought decision-making closer to those who are affected by those decisions. It doesn't mean they get everything right. I mean, we've seen from ULEZ in London, from 20-mile-an-hour speed zones in Wales, that not everything seems to actually please everybody. But at least it's local people making the local decision.
Yeah, and Harry Phibbs, you can't exactly claim that central government is necessarily brilliant at managing money either. They perhaps have just got deeper pockets.
No, well, what I would say is that we should try and decentralise power, but we shouldn't have an extra layer of government. That's actually bureaucratic and wasteful, but it's also bad for democracy because it's harder to know who to blame. Some of the people watching this will have a district council and a county council and might be forgiven for being unclear about which councillor is responsible for which service. Some of these extra things, these extra mayoral authorities, are pretty gimmicky and don't actually have that much power. There's some things like evening classes and location of bus stops, some small things which could be done by existing local authorities. And to the extent that they try and have more power, they've got a precept to have an extra council tax, and that's a financial burden on citizens. One point I would make is that we haven't necessarily had people wanting these. It was 25 years ago we had a referendum to have one in London, have Mayor of London, have the Welsh Assembly. I suspect if we had a repeat of those referendums, they'd want to abolish those structures. But these new ones, they're not even being given a chance. They're being imposed on people without referendum. So I think it's unnecessary. We want less government. We want less bureaucracy. We want to move to unitary authorities. I think.
Okay. So Nigel, I suppose what Harry's saying there, he's saying, why can't we use the existing systems rather than create more assemblies and more mayors? Why can't the existing councils absorb the responsibility?
Well, I mean, if you look at the way that devolution works, it depends on where you are. So, for instance, in Scotland, although it didn't stop the move towards independence, which Tony Blair had hoped it would do when he introduced it, what you have in Scotland is you have free prescriptions. I think people rather like that. Students rather like the idea they don't pay any tuition fees. So it's those kind of decisions that devolved authorities can take, which can differ then from the national government. And that's what I mean about there are certain decisions that work, certain ones which don't. I don't know whether or not, if we did have another referendum, whether the Scots or the Welsh would actually turn around and say, oh yeah, we'll get rid of our governments. I doubt that would work. Now, the question of actually imposing more devolution without referendums. Well, we've already had the referendum on the principle. Now we're getting on with the practice.
Yeah, look at Northern Ireland, Harry. We don't get on with anything because there isn't a government. They've absolved themselves of responsibility from devolution.
Well, and that's Northern Ireland's a very good point. That's something where they have these local authorities and they've got very little power. And I think it would be good if we had proper local government in Northern Ireland and got rid of this assembly, which is failing to function. I mean, one thing I would say is that Sadiq Khan, as Mayor of London, is a very poor advertisement for devolution, and he has started under Ken Livingstone, been greatly expanding the bureaucracy in City Hall, completely mismanaging the police, mismanaging transport for London. He unfortunately does have real powers, and he's done a pretty shambolic job with them. So I think we should be. It's good that we've got rid of our membership of the European Union. That increases accountability for our politicians. But the fewer politicians we have, the easier it is to identify them and hold them to account and hold them responsible. And the more layers you have, the easier it is for them to buck past. So far from this being an advance for democracy, it actually undermines local democracy.
Guys, got to leave it there. Sorry to be undemocratic about that, but you're out of time, both of you. Thank you very much indeed.